Welcome.
Welcome to DMs Discuss.
Welcome to DMs Discuss, where this week DMs will discuss some of our favorite moments from DMing. So this will be the second installment of our Dungeon Master Moments kind of subset in the podcast, where we'll all just kind of sit around, drink in hand, and regale you with tales of some of our favorite times DMing. I think Scott's going to start us off.
Yeah, I'm going to start us off while I start off my Berry Fields Tart and Juicy Fruit Sour. It's a ruby, raspberry, and red currant sour, which I really enjoy.
Nice.
So my first moment does come from the Wednesday game with Mike, and we have been chasing this hag around. I'm sure by this point in the podcast, you've heard about her quite a few times. But we've been chasing this hag around, and we finally end up at one point cornering her and finding her watchtower. And we've known that this hag kidnaps children and makes meat pies and things like that. And at one point, we end up cornering her, and we get her to pop out of the ethereal plane in her tower, and we just lob a shit ton of fireballs in there. And just based on us prepping that action for her popping out and lobbing the fireballs in there and the amount of damage we did, we absolutely annihilated her. And someone went in and like finished her off, but she was super low. And then afterwards, when we go and check the tower, Mike said that we heard screams, like screams of children. And it was only then when we realized we fucked up. Because, yeah, those fireballs did not just kill hags.
Yeah, I mean, what did you find the first time you went to that tower? Like early on before the hag started terrorizing you?
Children being kidnapped and children
Right.
in cages and stuff like that. And those meat pies that we, assumed were children. And yeah, I guess we came back and we like didn't bother to check. We accidentally murdered a bunch of kids.
So it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, that is my downer Dungeon Master moment. I feel like that was a bad way to start the podcast, but hey, I don't know. I was like, I thought it was funny because when Mike mentioned that, I was just like, oh fuck.
Honestly, that is one of those funny things because there's nothing about it like turning your players' like lack of foresight against them, and then having that moment where everyone comes like, in retrospect, actually that was really obvious, and this is a really bad idea. It's like I can't believe we didn't consider for like 1 second our actions might have consequences.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm playing a lawful good character, so I was like,
are you?
Uh-oh. Yeah, I mean, she is lawful good. I don't know if she is anymore, but I mean, she did not expect those children to be there, so does that make her bad now?
Which, again, in retrospect, probably we all should have expected children to be there.
Probably. Always expect children.
I mean, especially if it's, the children stealing evil witches.
Yeah.
Right.
Always expect some sort of collateral damage. It's never going to be so easy as you just like sit outside the building that your like big bad that's been terrorizing you for a while is in and just lob fireballs through windows.
You scope the outside of the camp of the child stealing bandits. Yeah, we lob fireballs in there.
Time for an over-channeled meteor storm.
If you want to leave no trace of the kids ever being there, Meteor Storm is your ticket.
I will come at this from a more subtle side of things on the DM end of luring my players into a trap, which honestly did not expect would work out as perfectly as it did. So I am running a very long-running campaign. It's been like 5 or 6 years now. And currently, they're level 19. They're fighting a cult that's bringing back an ancient chaos god. It's a whole mess. And the big thing about this cult is they are underground, insidious, and they are everywhere. And currently, they have taken down several branches, and it's made very difficult by the fact that every branch only knows about its own plans and only about the plans of one person a rank above and below them. So it makes it hard to track them down. Now, they're making good progress. They got like 3 of the branches completely wiped out, and they're on the trail of a 4th. And when I had a session, this was just a couple weeks ago, I had them go for resources. They're looking around, trying to find a research on some new clues they had uncovered. And there was a character who they met who was a librarian at the largest magic college, kind of like the most important one in the realm they're playing in. And he asked them some questions. He helped them out, got them to where they needed to be. And they went on a whole adventure of finding one of these great cult generals, killing him, and coming back. And a big thing was, as they're talking to this guy, they told him about what they knew, what they were looking for, and all this other sort of stuff. And also, they left him with a bunch of money to start a bursary to reward students who uncovered more knowledge about this cult.
A research grant.
Exactly. A research grant because students are hella broke. Textbooks are expensive. Magical textbooks are far, far worse. In any case, they had just acquired their third magical MacGuffin to go hunt down the king of everything. And they were about to go do that when they got a letter from this guy saying they should come see him. He had found out something really important. And so they did, and they went to this library. And he runs a magical library. It's connected to all different libraries in space and time, so it's full of books that haven't been written, books that shouldn't have been written, and stuff like that. Definitely stolen from Terry Pratchett, but I love the concept. And so as they're walking down for him to show him this something, he pulls out this water-stained book, and he asks them if they've ever heard the full story of a pirate they've killed several times called Gerzvog, who was an actual orc pirate, came back as a ghost pirate resurrected by the cult to stop them, who they then killed again. And he goes on for a bit telling them like the loose story of this guy going up. And I was nervous at this point because I didn't think I'd actually get them like in the perfect position inside the library with this guy. And then I start saying like, oh, as he's reading this, like the walls start to like they damp and you smell sea air and you hear the sound of a ship. And I was playing this on my projected map, so it's actually changing the color of the lighting of the floors. I was playing the sound of like the sea as they did this, and the player's like, "Oh yeah, like we're just kind of jam out to this." And that's when I told them to roll for initiative as he transformed into a version of this pirate. And
Nice.
they were so surprised.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah, it was kind of
Yeah,
terrifying.
they were out of combat for so long. They were in the middle of a magical library following this guy who'd been very helpful this entire time.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like in some cases like that, the players are just like, oh, such nice ambiance. Oh, this is lovely, but meanwhile, it's an in-game sound.
Oh
The
yeah, we were like,
sea
oh, this is so cool. This is great. This is so cool. Like everything was shifting and changing as he's like starting to tell this story. And Chris like, and roll initiative.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah, this ended up being one of the favorite boss fights that I've played on my end. And the players
Oh, yeah.
enjoyed it, but they were very annoyed by it because I will say, up until now, they were fighting the very in-your-face branches of the cult. But this one's like the information gatherers, the mages, and stuff like that, and they're very sneaky and insidious. And this guy played like a high-level mage in that he constantly misty step, thunderstep, blink, like did everything could to run away from them in a essentially infinite labyrinth library. So it's very frustrating, not to mention the fact that at the start of every round for his lair action, he would tell a new story by rolling on a story table, assuming a completely different form with different actions and its own hit bar, making it a very frustrating fight for the players, but very accurate to how a high level like master mage would play.
Yeah, it was incredible.
I really like that, like roll on a story table. I recently had a chance to play College of
Spirits.
College of Spirits, yeah. College of Spirits Bard, and they have this little story table you roll on, and you get to tell a little story about, the far traveler or this. And the different stories just basically give different effects and buffs. I think there was one about a dragon where the way you do it is you use a bonus action or a bardic inspiration actually to roll on the story table. And then based on the story you get a particular effect, and then you need to use your action to like release that effect essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was that the effect was that a creature I can see within 30 feet basically gets to make like a dragon's breath. And yeah, that little story table mechanic's super cool. I like it.
Yeah, I was inspired by that when I was building him. So I built him as a College of Scribes wizard, which has like some pretty cool stuff, but I took inspiration from the Bard table. But then I thought like, well, I mean, if he's like this, extremely ancient sage. He's not going to just, get like a minor boost from telling these stories. He's a master of libraries. So like, what if he just becomes the story? So
That's
the
cool.
entire library changes, like the terrain changes, like for the story of like the Afridi Prince, like the ground becomes sand, it's difficult terrain, you get sucked into it, and then he turns into an Afrit.
Small suck or big suck?
Oh, it was a big suck. It did
Big
a lot
suck.
of damage. They're
Nice.
level 19. It was 40-10.
Yeah, it was legit. It basically made like the fight super chaotic because it didn't matter how much damage you did because he was getting you health bar all the time. So you had to like every turn, essentially, like every turn order, he was telling a new story and taking on a new form. You had no idea what was coming next, and it gave the encounter like a really kind of crazy feel. We had to try to burn through the health bar of whatever form he was in during that turn order, and he would turn back into his like kind of default form, and that's the only time you actually do damage to him. Otherwise, the damage was to these different forms.
That's really
Right,
cool.
so damage would carry over into him, kind of like a wild shape. It was almost as if he was wild shaping into these crazy forms, but he got a new one every turn order.
It
Wild
was
stories.
cumulative, so like the damage would carry over if he got that form again. But
Mhm.
collectively, I think so far it was probably the second highest health enemy they've ever fought. With
How much health?
I think
How
he
much health?
had,
Yeah.
I think about okay, they didn't burn through all the health because they didn't see one of his forms. They didn't kill all of them because they were able to like do enough chip damage. But if they had like burned through everything, I think he had about between 800 and 1,000.
Wow, it's a lot of health.
Yeah.
A very healthy boy.
Well, I mean, he was 10 different people.
It is a very healthy 10-person boy.
It's I'd say for level 19, that's a very average 10 people.
Yes.
I suppose when you put them all together, like they multiply their strength, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't know how it was going to go because based on his rolls, there was a chance that they could like burn through one form, like get it twice in a row, and then just
Yeah.
do a ton of damage to him because he didn't have a lot. Most of his forms had more health than he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing was that once they killed them, I reduced like the die number, so there was a higher chance to get ones they hadn't seen before as they wore through his forms.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That reminds me of an episode of The Office where Dwight talks about how he was a twin, but then he resorbed the other fetus, and now he has the power of a man and a small child, and a small fetus. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Basically that. Except with many, many like more powerful forms.
Side thing I have to add on: the one form that made everyone go crazy was probably the best one because
The
that
bear.
created the most chaos.
Why did it make them go
Oh
crazy?
God.
And what chaos?
So I'm running a side mechanic in my game where there's a madness system where you have another stat called madness, which is based on like proficiencies, magic casting ability, which gives you like essentially a resting level of madness. And certain attacks witnessing certain things will cause it to raise. Every time you raise 5 points in it, you gain a indefinite madness effect. That lasts until you cast Greater Restoration on yourself. So essentially, one of his stories was he told the story of the Chaos God Thara's Dune, who they're trying to stop. And for that one, I was describing like what happens in it. In this one, all the walls dropped away. They were left inside like kind of like a red and black void, and then just they saw the actual chain god in his like prison plane above them, and they all took like just a lot of madness points.
It
And
was
they got
5
some,
points each. We each got a new
yeah.
a new effect each.
And it was unfortunate because two of the players were paralyzed, one for 2 minutes and one for 4 minutes. And the other player, who was the level 19 fighter, got the effect of he has to spend his turn attacking the nearest creature to him.
Paralysis.
And he does a
Which
ridiculous
was
amount
the
of damage.
paralyzed bard.
Paralysis
Now,
in
I'll say
D&D.
the paralysis broke as soon as you took damage. But for the bard that's right beside him, knowing that this guy's going to get a crit on him for the first attack, and then also roll another several against him.
Yeah, paralysis in D&D is like the worst condition. I am not a fan.
Oh, it's terrible.
It really is. It is one of the worst conditions.
But yeah, that I think that really put the fear of God into my players.
The
Yeah, absolutely.
fear of the chaos god into your players.
Yeah, fear of the
Yes,
mad
fear
God.
of Thera's Doom.
Mike, you got a DM moment for us?
Yeah, so I think speaking of the fear of God, I am probably going to talk about the Wednesday game as well. I have kind of a tendency as a GM to not say no to players. It leads to me having tables that are full of people that have overpowered characters and usually too many of them. But it usually lends itself to some fun in-game stuff as well. So I'm going to tell the story of how y'all killed Strahd super early in our campaign. So this hag that Scott talked about earlier had been terrorizing them for quite some time, kept reforming new covens and coming back and interrupting their sleep and like not letting people get proper rests and just like chilling in the corner and watching them and laughing at them as they were getting their ass handed to them by like larger encounters. So finally they devised this plan and they asked if they could do a thing that they absolutely should not have been able to do. And I said, sure. So what they did was combine their powers where one of the characters, a ranger, cast a magic circle into a glyph of warding that the wizard was casting, and they put that on an arrow. I know, rules is written, you cannot put it on something that moves. If it moves more than 10 feet from the place that it was cast, it breaks. I know. But I thought it would be cool. I didn't really have much more use for the hag. I'd been terrorizing with it for a while. It was starting to lose its effects. I was like, sure, you guys can do this. It would be pretty rad to see you like work together. And they like legitimately role played how they would do it. And it was awesome. Like it was one of the coolest things I've seen in like a players only kind of moment in D&D where like people were just interacting and doing something cool. So I was cool with that. And what I also like doing in that campaign is being kind of ever present with Strahd. So if you feel like an encounter is going well for you, he would just like swoop in and fuck shit up and then leave. So those that don't know, Strahd's mount is a nightmare, which has the ability to kind of bamf in and out of the ethereal plane with whoever's on it. So I've used that in the past to actually get rid of a character that somebody wanted to swap out and kill them for kind of exposition and let them see what Strahd really looked like. But in this case, what happened was they had this plan devised, and the hags were present in the city they came back into, and shit was on fire. They cleaned up some of the werewolves that were there, and the hags came out because they thought there was an opportunity. And when they did, I think the paladin like ended up critting the hell out of the hag, and it was basically super low already. So what had happened was because the healer was kind of chilling in the corner away from everybody else, I thought it would be fun to swoop down with Strahd on the back of his nightmare and just grab onto the healer. So I did that. Strahd comes out of the ethereal in the back corner of the battlefield and swoops down, grabs onto the tiny Muppet healer, and starts to take off. And what happened next is why you should always kind of consider why rules are written the way they are. The players ended up dealing with the hags pretty quickly, and they had to bamf out or risk being killed. So the remaining hag in the group used her plane shift and got away. And the party turned just in time to see the healer, who actually went next in initiative, pull out the talisman of Raven, or was it Ravenkind? I forget the name of it now. But anyway, he pulled out basically the anti-vampire talisman, made it shed daylight, and just like pushed it into Strahd's face. And then our ranger pulled out the arrow that was meant for hag slaying.
I think you are missing a very key part of this story, Mike.
Oh no, the polymorph came right after the arrow hit.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Oh,
so it was after. So the ranger pulls out the arrow, hits Strahd with the attack. So the magic circle goes off, and Strahd is still on the back of this nightmare, which has like pretty high charisma, and you can get out of a magic circle through teleportation if you pass a charisma save. So the nightmare then gets polymorphed into a goldfish and falls into the fountain at the base. And then who was it that Cone of Colded?
I think it was Grover Cone of Colded.
Grover Cone of Colded the fountain to freeze it over so that the goldfish would be stuck inside underneath the water, while he just continued to press the daylight emanating talisman to the face of the vampire as he just got the shit stomped out of him in like a round and a half.
Yeah,
with no ability to get away.
And I remember, okay, so after that Cone of Cold, which was brilliant, right? Because if someone's polymorphed into a goldfish, that's like a 1 HP creature. So all Strahd needs to do is like run a fingernail across it and it's back into its nightmare form. But the Cone of Cold freezes it over. So Strahd did spend a turn trying to crack through the ice to get the fish. But I remember I was playing Eyes at that point, and I remember using Eyes as like Shadow Step to come into the circle. And it was my turn, and I look around and I'm like, we're doing this, right? And we just wailed on him, and that talisman in the daylight. Oh man.
Oh yeah, you guys had the perfect combination of all the things you needed to kill him. But that is why it is dangerous to let your players do whatever they want. But at the same time, it was super cool, and it led to me getting to build out this whole extra world because y'all wanted to keep playing after Strahd was dead.
Let me encourage that. This is exactly why you let players do what they want. Because this was such a fucking cool moment for everybody involved. And like to this day, like all we need to say is magic circle or glyph of warding, and this will come to mind. And like the way everything unfolded here was so organic and like just an absolute picture perfect display of like party teamwork. It was such a fucking cool moment, and I mean, you could hear the way I'm talking about it. Like, I love that moment.
Oh, and also my goldfish brain though. Like, I knew you had that arrow, and I knew you weren't going to use it on the hags anymore. What the fuck was I doing?
That
was a good moment, like for me too, because I had just got Magic Circle from leveling up as a Monster Hunter Ranger, and like my character's whole thing was that he's really good at hunting monsters. So like when the point was we were brainstorming with the hag, I was just like, I got this new spell that kind of stops anyone from leaving. Could we use this?
Yeah, and I think one thing about that moment too that I found really, really cool was just everybody wailing on him and just him turning into dust. And my character too in that campaign was like, his whole thing was he was a Shatterkai elf, and he was sent back by the Raven Queen to, investigate this great evil. And that was actually the exit point for my first character in that campaign, where Strahd was dead and he felt like fulfilled, and his equipment was left near the fountain and he was just gone. So that moment's like big for me too, because that was like the quote unquote death of my first character. It just felt best that way.
Yeah. Iz's quest was done. Made sense. Cool. What are you guys feeling like? Do we want to keep going?
Yeah, I want to get to that last one, and I think that's one that we. Yeah, and I think that one's a joint one, right? So, I think Mike and I have identified this as one of our favorite moments, and I guess I'll tell it from my perspective, and then Mike, you can tell it from yours, I guess. So, as Chris had said, he played this Monster Hunter Ranger, and his name was Rickpur Belmeow, from the Belmeow clan. It was Tabaxi, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Yes, it was a very serious character.
Tabaxi Ranger.
Not at all completely ripped out of Castlevania.
Yeah. Non-TM. Whatever one's appropriate there. But anyways, so, I like party tension to a certain degree. I think it adds something interesting to have 5 characters that get along all the time and have no group conflict. I think can be boring, right? Some inter-party conflict always makes for a more realistic session and a more realistic campaign, I feel. So I talked to Chris and I said, hey, I know you're a monster hunter. I've been looking at playing this artificer, and her background is that she's a lycanthrope, but she's learned to control it, and her artificing power comes from the moon. because when talking to party members, it's like, what class should I play now that Eyes is gone? And the consensus was an artificer. I'm like, okay, but I don't really like the steampunk and mechanical aspects. So what can I use to artifice? And Kierna had gems across her arm, and I basically used the power of the moon to artifice. I would carve gems, and the moon is what would power my spells. So I talked to Chris out of game and said, hey, Chris, I know you're playing a monster hunter who absolutely hates werewolves. Can I play a werewolf? And Chris said, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was completely fine with it. And I feel we should say, like, to clarify this, the character I was playing was literally, because we were playing a vampire campaign, I just took Richter Belmont, made him a cat, and gave him the flaw of he just both hates and is terrified of werewolves.
Yeah, and I talked to Chris about playing a werewolf, and we decided that yeah, that's a great idea. And we pulled Kierna in, and throughout the time, like Kierna was humanoid, she did look human, and she was a shifter, but she never shifted in battle, just because she knew how she might be perceived, and through time with the party, Rickper would sing songs about if my family was a werewolf, I'd slay them all, stuff like that. So yeah, Kierna never really made it obvious or never made it apparent she was a werewolf. As things went on with the party, and as Kierna grew trust in certain people, she did tell and show them, including Reardon, who was one of the other PCs. Reardon took over a town, and he was the Lord of Barovia.
I believe it's Saint King is
Oh
what
well,
he dubbed himself.
at
At
that
the
point, I think it was
time.
Lord.
Right.
Yeah, at the time, I think it was Lord Reardon. I don't think he was King Reardon or Saint King Reardon. But anyways, and she said, like I know how my kind is perceived. I don't believe us all to be evil. I am not evil. I was forced to do evil deeds in the past, but I am looking for redemption, and that was Kierna's goal. She wanted to reunite with her family and redeem herself for the things she had done wrong. And as things go on and progress, everyone in the party learns that Kieran is a shifter, and she even shifts in front of some of them, with the shifter racial. And I describe that as her like crystals on her arms and things hardening, etc. Everyone except Rickper. Rickper never knew, never saw, and Kierna and Rickper had like some kind of friendship. Kierna wanted to learn how to hunt monsters with him. Kierna was working towards becoming that, and Kierna actually took a blood hunter level at one point. Kierna was artificer, fighter, and then at some point in the campaign, she did take a blood hunter level. But her and Rickper were, forming a friendship and kind of, just being closer to each other.
Yeah, I will hop in here from like Rickper's side of things. Is that, obviously I, as me, knew that Kieran's a shifter, but I played up as that, I wanted to make sure that as a character she knew that he hated werewolves, and also that his family line had been cursed to hunt down all monsters. Like, this is unavoidable, and also to like, this is a path they walked alone. And so Kieran, wanted to learn monster hunting, and Rickper was reluctant at first, but then grew to trust her and did it because, every time his family has tried this, it always fails because like it's his family's curse to like this is their job to do alone. So if he ever has allies, it's not for long. So that was where he is coming from at this. Is like, I hate werewolves. I trust you, Kyrtis. I'll try to teach you this, but part of him knew deep down like this wouldn't be like a lasting thing, but he hoped it would be.
Yeah. So at one point, something happened after the death of Strahd in our campaign. Something happened where different domains started to collide with our current world, and one of those domains was a werewolf domain, and we started to see various werewolf attacks on the city and things like that. At one point, Kierna was in battle, and we were all in battle with like over 30 werewolves, and we actually had to use Kierna's luck blade and the one wish on it to cast teleport and get us all out, or we would have TPK'd. And Mike, I think you could confirm that was a total TPK.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you guys are fucked.
Yeah. So after that, we do end up getting in a different battle with a good set of werewolves and some beefier ones that we haven't seen before. And at this point, Kieran is at like 10 HP. And as my shifter sub race, when I shift, I gain a bunch of temp HP. So I felt desperate enough at that point to shift. And yeah, Chris, maybe you want to tell that side of the story.
So yeah, I played that very much as my character would have, is that, Kirita shifts, and at this point, I'm the only one who does not know that Kieran is a shifter. And so, like, we fight at the battle, this moment where Rick Picard looked over, was like, what the actual fuck? uh, and then, yeah, so afterwards, I demanded an explanation and found out that for quite some time, the entire party had known this, and they had hidden it from me.
Afterwards, you pointed a crossbow at me, a crossbow that was strung with one of my magical infusions.
Yeah, that I did, because I was highly suspicious, because out of nowhere, of course, like, from character side, suddenly legions of werewolves attack the instant we finished our campaign, and I find out that one of my closest people to me is one of these things, so I'm immediately suspicious.
One of the closest people to you, who was surrounded by 6 of these things and defending the entire party.
I know, but I highly suspicious, hate them, terrified of them, in the character flaws. Played it
Yeah.
by the book.
So there was this whole conversation about Rick Purr holding his crossbow up at me and me saying, like, look at the infusion on your crossbow. Look at what I just did. Look, and I was really low HP at that point, and I took this was like 120 HP artificer with like a 24 AC and the shield spell. Like, and I took a beating that fight. No, Mike?
Yeah, you had like 7 HP or something left.
Yeah, I think I was at 10 or below at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and to be that low from 100 something HP when I have like a 24 AC and the shield spell, yeah, I mean, you can imagine the onslaught there. But yeah, there
I'd
was
like
this
to say I only took about 20 damage during that fight.
yeah, well, fuck you. Well, maybe if you take a little more, Kieran and Rickford would still be friends.
I mean, Rickford would still be alive.
Yeah. So wait, what did you say?
I said Rickford would still be there.
Oh yeah, probably. So anyways, after all this tension and stuff, Rickford finds out he's the only one that knows, and Rickford finds out he's the only one that knows, and he feels so betrayed. Rickford and Kierna stop talking that night, and then in the morning, the entire party gathers. Kierna does as well. Kierna goes to the kitchen to talk to Rickper about it, because Rickper had the chef feat and he is usually cooking us snacks and breakfast. And Chris, maybe you want to tell this part.
Yeah, so like everyone was going about stuff, and I'd already talked this over with Mike ahead of time so that he was ready for it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, like when you go there, as like, Rick isn't with the group, he wasn't in the kitchen at all, and so people started looking for him.
Yeah, I didn't go there. I think it was Kaladin. Kaladin went to find Rickper after that.
Yeah,
At the
so like,
house, yeah.
people went to a couple places, kitchen, the house, and River stuff was just packed up, and there's just a note left on the bed for Kierna.
Yeah, and yeah, Mike, you want to tell this part?
Yeah, so I essentially had this note that Chris had left for Kierna to be read out loud, essentially, and it was essentially like I don't know how to deal with this. I feel betrayed, but you're also my friend. I'm cursed to do this thing. I can't not hunt your kind, so I need to leave. And he also left a little medallion of his family's order for Kierna.
Yeah,
It was one of the most touching, like, player-to-player moments I've ever seen in a game. Legit teared up when I read the note.
yeah, and I legit cried when I heard that note being read, because I had in my head, you have your vision for a character, and my vision was to fight side by side with Rickper as a monster hunter. I was taking additional blood hunter levels. I was pushing to be like establish an order of good aligned lichens that would fight along the bell meows. I don't know. I don't know how I would make that happen, but that was the vision for my character, and I wanted to work with Rickper to do that. And when Matt read that note, I legit had to mute myself because I cried. It was one of those things where you have all this vision and like in an instant, I did not expect Rickper to leave. I knew there's going to be tension. I didn't expect a full out, yeah, I'm gone, see ya. But the amulet was actually not the family's order, but kind of a side order where if you're not a Bellmeow and you don't have the curse, there's an order that fights alongside the family. And
Yeah, it's
Rickper had,
the Order of Ecclesia, based on the Order of Ecclesia.
yeah.
Dear Lord, Chris.
And Rickper was allowing
This character did not start off as a serious character.
and Rickper was allowing Kierna to become part of that. And then I had a little character moment that I'll never forget. Kierna was mad. Kierna was fucking angry. And Kierna felt betrayed as much as Rickper did. You know, Kierna didn't tell him because of the way he may react. I mean, he's been singing songs about slaying werewolves, and all of them are evil, and none of them are good. And she feared that he would just kill her. And she was working up towards being able to tell him, but because I decided to shift, I no longer got that chance. And Kierna just felt so hurt and betrayed. She went to her room, and I don't recall what she cast. I think she was sitting there and she laid out, oh, it was her infusion. So she laid out the infusion representing Kaladin's holy weapon. She laid out the infusion representing Pistol's ring. She laid out one of her infusions, and then the last infusion was the bow, Rickper's magical bowstring. And she swung her sword at it, and then at the very last moment stopped and broke down and cried. And Kierna kept that infusion up until she died, which was not long after, but she
a couple days.
Yeah, so in character, I felt that Kierna would not break that infusion. She cared too much about Rickper to make his weapon weaker, and you know, kind of gimp the party because you're losing out one infusion for a character that's not here. But Kierna, I felt like okay, well, that infusion is gone because Kierna would never drop that. Yeah, and Kierna was so after that, Kierna was so angry and she broke down and cried, and she kind of took this. All right, well, like you're gonna run away, you're gonna be a coward. I'm gonna show you I can be the best monster hunter ever. And she grabbed her sword, ran her hand over it, sliced her hand open a bit. The blood covered the sword and then ignited into flames. Because I had messaged Mike, can I drop a fighter level for another blood hunter level? Because Kierna is just fucking pissed. And that was one of my favorite D&D moments. And if you want to know how much that moment means to me, in a few weeks I'll have a big tattoo on my right arm representing some of that. So yeah, that was one of my favorite moments ever in D&D, playing or watching or listening.
Yeah, honestly, that was so much fun because also I didn't really expect it to play out that way either. Like I was like also looking forward to like the big like ongoing quest line of it, but just the way it ended up happening with like I hadn't got into how my curse worked and stuff like that. But to find out that like the entire party knew that you were a shifter and Rickper didn't, I was like, oh man, it's gonna like play us out a little bit. But I think the only option right now is Rickper. He has to leave, so he doesn't have to like kill his friends. And because you know he's been grew up in a essentially a brainwashed monster hunting cult that is like, don't trust anyone. Our family is in this alone. Everyone's gonna either turn on you, use you, or just be a monster in disguise. And Rickper's like, ah, god damn it, number 3 again. Uh, time to go.
Yeah, for sure. And one of those things that you don't normally get to do is like changing major character things like the levels you have in certain classes and stuff, but I feel like that's something you can let your players do in situations where they have like a huge formative moment like that, or something that would be like earth shattering to the character.
Oh yeah, I love that happens.
Absolutely. Your fucking wizard jumps on the back of a dragon, starts to beat the shit out of it with a staff, and he wants to take a fighter level. Let him do it, man. I feel that
Or your wizard jumps in a dragon, starts beating it off, and takes a Draconic Origin Sorcerer level.
Oh,
it's kind of gross. Yeah, our podcast is rated PG, right?
no.
Yeah, I don't know. I really like the whole level switch thing. I think it's, if it makes sense, do it. Like your fighter is no longer fighting anymore and starts becoming a very godly man, and he wants to, like, maybe he's a 10th level fighter, but he wants to switch out one fighter level for a cleric level. If there's a very impactful moment that, even stats, right? I think if you can justify it in story and in character, moments like that can be really, really cool. And her dropping fighter for a blood hunter level was a representation of, no, I'm not going to be this defensive fighter anymore. I'm dropping a fighter level, and I'm not going to be action surging. I'm going to be lighting my fucking weapons on fire, and I'm going to be like that.
Yeah,
that was
the rage of the blood hunter coming out.
essentially, yeah.
I tried tempting Mike with some level swaps when he essentially met an evil god and it told him he could, accept this power, and he didn't. But afterwards, it's like, hey, would have let you like swap warlock levels and just become like a super powerful hexblade.
Would you have allowed a level switch in that Kierna moment?
Yeah, I think in that like moment, like hearing like the reasons why, especially because like it's definitely like it was obviously not like a power switch. It wasn't just like, oh man, I just realized like if I do this, I could like action search and do this nonsense thing. So my guy wants power, so he switches. No, it's obviously completely character driven and not for like any kind of like gameplay. But so of course I'll always allow that stuff.
100% character driven. I actually think the character would have been less powerful, but yeah, not less powerful, but just different. Like, I get a little more fire damage on my attacks, but I can't action surge anymore.
Yeah.
So maybe a little more steady damage.
Maybe more sustained damage. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh yeah, I love taking levels and stuff that's all like character, even if it's not for the sake of power.
Have you seen my characters? Have you seen my
they're all
Yeah.
that.
3 lock, 1 bard, 1 cleric, 5 paladin, 1 bard? What, like?
Yeah, basically, if you see Scott playing a character that's like less than 3 classes, he just doesn't give a shit about your game.
Hey, you know what? I think, like, listen, you know what? I think it's Wizards' fault for making a Twilight Cleric dip so nice, or a Life Cleric dip so nice. You play a sorcerer, you take 1 level in Cleric, you get heavy armor.
Yeah.
Like, that's so good. There's so much value in that dip.
Yeah, one cleric will always be one of the strongest dips you can take on most classes.
Yeah, even just like a 1 Warlock dip for Eldritch Blast, so good.
If you're taking 1, take 2, so you get agonizing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's how most warlocks are created. It's like, well, you might as well take another one. Next thing you know, you signed over your soul and you've got an army of demons. I do love the idea of just like low level like warlock patrons just kind of like hanging around like adventuring bars, just being like, look, I'm really not asking for much, and you get an Eldritch Blast. Like, that's it. We're calling it one and done. You just say this. All I need is a single vial of blood, and you get Eldritch Blast.
Cool. So I think that was a pretty solid collection of some of our favorite moments, both DMing and playing. And I hope you all enjoy these. We're going to be doing a lot more of these in Tears Core episodes as we kind of wind down the intro to DMing stuff. Yeah. So I hope you join us next week. As always, I'm Mike. And if you need to slide into a DMs, you can DM us on Insta, Twitter, or Facebook at DMs Discuss, or catch us via email at dmsdiscuss@gmail.com.
And I'm Chris, and make sure to trick your podcaster app into letting you cast Magic Circle and a symbol so that no new episodes escape your grasp.
As always, check the show notes for fun stuff, Do you have a favorite DM moment? Hit us up on our socials at DMs Discuss and let us know. After that, enjoy your long rest.